Are you currently struggling with your mental health? Struggling to get yourself out of a hole and not sure what the purpose of life is? Have you been studying and reading and not quite sure how all this information fits in? Have you heard of the law of attraction and are confused by what it actually means and how to apply it? And have you ever wondered if you have an intuitive ability? If so, then today's episode is for you, as I'm joined by Paul Davis. Paul is an award-winning business growth consultant, a 3-time best-selling author, and intuitive advisor who developed a unique methodology to help people discover their authentic life purpose. With a background in accountancy and 2 decades of business consultancy experience, Paul combines logical, evidence-based approaches with profound intuitive insight to guide individuals and organizations towards fulfilling their true purpose. As the 7th son of a 7th child in Irish tradition, Paul has harnessed his intuitive gifts to create what he calls the Genius Code, a blueprint for personal mastery and for connecting with your genius self and aligning your work with your deeper purpose. Today's episode is not one to be missed, but before we dive in, there is a trigger warning. Further on in the episode, when Paul describes and discusses his mental health struggles, he talks about suicide ideation. If this is something that you struggle with, please skip past that using the chapter marks below. But I'd like to welcome Paul Davis to the Prime Life Project. Paul, how are you doing today?
I'm absolutely amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm thrilled to be here.
I'd like to apologise again publicly on the start of the podcast for the little mix-up of keeping you waiting. It's completely on me. However, as I've just said, very excited to be talking with you today because normally when I have guests on, again, I know a lot of the content we're going to be talking about, but with yourself, we had a chat before we started and the stuff we're going to go into, I'm intrigued by. So the first thing I want to talk about is you've got this fascinating background of being both an accountant and somebody with intuitive abilities. So the thing I want to ask first of all is, could you explain what being the 7th son of a 7th child means in Irish tradition? And then can you sort of tell us how you've managed to blend these two like completely opposite worlds and basically got this intuition work in a place that really doesn't seem like it belongs?
Yeah, I'll try and be as simple as I can. Yeah, so I was born the 7th son of the 7th child of a 7th child. So my mum was the 7th child and her father was the 7th child in his family. In Irish tradition, if you're born the 7th son of a 7th child, you're typically known for somebody that's been gifted. And the term says being gifted. And it typically originated from the agricultural scene within Ireland. And so how it came about originally was that the 7th son of a 7th child would be born with a gift, and that gift would typically be healing, but it would be healing for animals, and that's how it was actually originally discovered. So if an animal went down through to an illness or a sickness or whatever it might be, or got infected with something, the 7th child would be brought out in order to give the animal a healing. And pretty much, people call it, miracles, but it would be a miraculous healing that would actually be given because the animal literally would be back on its feet very, very quickly after healing. As the years went on, it then developed into the 7th son in particular. The 7th son of a 7th child would give healing to humans. So when I was born, because I happened to be the 7th son in the family, and the 7th son of a 7th child of a 7th child, so 3 sevens. And anybody who's into numerology will know that 7, first of all, is a powerful number, but then you get 3 sevens together, which is an extremely powerful number. So my family already knew, because both my parents were from the country, and they both knew that, okay, so he must be gifted. So there's a test that you can do. I know it's pretty gruesome, but I'll explain it anyway. But there's a test that you can do to determine whether you are actually the 7th son of a 7th child and has the healing gift. And what they do is they put a worm on your hand, and if the worm dies, pretty quickly, well, then you've got the gift. And the indication basically is that if an animal has worms, for example, or an infection, well, then you're killing the infection. Let's put it that way. And so that's how the test is actually done and carried out. So it's pretty gruesome. But as a kid, I don't even remember the test being done. But my brother do recall that test every now and again, as a bit of a laugh. But
was it a specific worm, or was it just like a generic?
Just normal worm, garden worm. Yeah. So the poor worm. But so as a child, I'd have a lot of people coming to the home for a healing. So it's called faith healing, basically. And so I'd have all people from all different walks of life, all different illnesses. So rheumatism, cancer. I even had a Catholic priest come to me, which is extremely unusual because Catholic priests don't tend to believe in those side of things. So that's when I started off as a child. But then becoming into a teenager, I just went away from it because it just wasn't cool. So
can I just pause there? Like, yeah. So when you're doing this healing as a child, are you kind of like taught like the rituals, the things, or are you simply just putting your hands on the person and like saying a prayer for them? Like, how does it actually work?
Yeah, it kind of. I was never really taught instruction wise, if that makes sense. So you're kind of. I remember the early days, and I remember in my own mind, it was kind of, what am I supposed to say? And I do remember, like, my mum used to do it with me, and I used to ask mum then after, like, what am I supposed to say, or what am I supposed to do? So she would just say, just say a few prayers, put your hands, and so holy water would be put on my hands, and then I put my hands on the person where the ailment was. That's what that way. So, for example, if it was rheumatism, and the person had really, like their knees would be quite sore, I'd put my hands on their knees and say prayers over their knees. So that was kind of the indication. Later on, I do remember, as such being kind of, for want of a better word, being prompted or being guided to, move the hands to a particular area or a particular side or whatever, and so on. And that was my first inkling of intuition, to be guided to where to move the hands. So that was pretty much it. And normally it's 3 healings that take place for the person. And but I've no end of stories of, well, from my mum and brothers and so on, of different people referring to the fact that they've been healed and different, feeling better, migraines, all that kind of thing. So, but I didn't enjoy it, to be quite honest with you, because it was a bit like a circus act for me. I refer to that in my first book. And I kind of just felt, look, these people were coming to the home. I was being not wheeled out, but you know what I mean? I was being brought out to do a healing. And I was kind of, being an empath and intuitive, which I didn't understand at that time, but later on in my life, I did completely understand it. I'm picking up the feelings of everybody else around me. So being an empath, you deeply understand and know and experience the feelings that somebody else has experienced on a very, very deeper level. It's not just superficial. So I was picking up all this stuff around me, both within the family and the people that were coming to the home. So in some respects, unconsciously, I was kind of saying, look, I'm not enjoying this. And consciously, I was saying, it's kind of weird, for want of a better word. And when you're growing up as a teenager, it's not something you want to do, to be quite honest. So I went away from it, let's put it that way.
Was it an easy decision to do, like when it comes to like walking away from it? Because obviously I imagine to have like this gift, I know you didn't necessarily understand it at the time, but I imagine that's quite a hard thing for you to do, to sort of step away from that. And was there a bit of like resentment or resistance within your family or community for you actually stepping away from your gift, as it were?
Yeah, nobody ever said anything. Although I knew Mum was hugely disappointed. Like, I mean, really, really disappointed. My mum always wanted a priest in the family, and she thought me being the
next best thing,
I would have gone into the priesthood. But no, so she never said anything, but I just knew by her that she was completely and utterly devastated and disappointed. And different occasions would come up over the years, whereby, she'd tell me a story about somebody that was suffering from an illness or whatever, and so on. And even still, I just wouldn't go there. But I knew what she wanted, but it just wasn't for me anymore. You know,
So then
it did show up around my life, but I just never. I did it in different ways later as an adult. I did it in different ways, and even when I'm going into a business and working with clients, I send a healing energy, and that's different. So I don't do hands-on healing, but I will send a healing energy to the clients I'm working with for their business to improve. So I'm putting in a very intentional energy. And if I'm doing a workshop, for example, and I got a group of people with me and I'm doing retreats, I will, before I start the workshops or the retreats, I'm putting a particular intentional energy into the workshop itself. And even into my first book, I put an intentional energy, and it was amazing to hear from readers back from having read the first book that intention was, they were able to even pick up that intention. It's not within the words, but it's the energy within the book itself. So
can you talk a bit about this energy? Because for me, I understand exactly what you mean by this, but for people listening to this that may not have a clue what you're talking about, like, because obviously people may have heard the word intention, they might understand energy. And again, like nowadays, it's kind of more popularized as vibes. Like, you get a vibe off somebody. So can you kind of like just combine the two for my audience that don't really necessarily understand what we mean by this intentional energy that we're talking about?
Yeah. So okay, let me bring around this way. A lot of people will talk about goals in business and personal life. People will say, well, set your goal and go, everybody will have heard about SMART goals, be specific, measurable, actionable, and whatever the other RT is, timely and all that kind of stuff and so on. You'll gather I don't use SMART goals. Because they don't work. Honestly, they don't work. They work in some respects, but not really. The approach that I take is what's the intention that you want to have? So it all for me starts with the intention. So everything is energy. Everything is energy. So it's one of the universal laws. So your thoughts are an energy. You're an energy. You express an energy. So what you were saying there in relation to, you could walk into a room and you can pick up the energy of the room. So everything is energy. So, but when we bring our intention and our thoughts around to what is the outcome that we want to have, you're not just, how would I say, you're focusing your whole being into what it is that you want to bring about. So when I'm doing healing or when I'm doing a workshop, I'm purposely focusing every element of me into that intention that I want to bring about. So when people talk about, over the years, people would have heard about the law of attraction. It's only one of the universal laws, and hence the reason why, if they don't understand the other 11 universal laws, they don't know why the law of attraction is not working. So if you understand again the universal laws, now what you're doing is you're focusing every single piece of you from an energetic perspective into what you want to bring about, either from a manifesting perspective or for the business or for people that you want to have or want to be. And there's been a whole huge amount of science behind this in terms of that energy and that intention being picked up by other people. So yeah, I suppose that's the only way I can explain it. Really, it's focusing every element of your being into what it is that you want to have, the outcome that you want to achieve.
I just want to stay on this for a little bit, only because I think I said this to you when we first spoke, that somebody like yourself doesn't look like the kind of person that's going to talk about universal laws, law of attraction, that sort of stuff. And I said it before, like when I go on stage and talk about it as well, I get the same sort of thing. People are like, what's this guy kind of talking about? So I kind of just want to stay on this for a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
My personal belief is when it comes to law of attraction, that people are purposefully given bits. So they're basically given bits of a jigsaw puzzle, but don't know what the actual picture is they're trying to put together. So they get stuck not doing the right thing and getting frustrated with themselves and all that sort of stuff. Do you think there's an element of that, of why people aren't taught the universal laws, why the law of attraction is pushed so much? Because as we discussed, you have to understand other things, like the precursors, like the law of vibration. If you don't understand that, you're not going to understand the law of attraction and so on and so forth. Yeah. So do you think there's almost like a deliberate ploy to keep this information suppressed, to not give people the full picture? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's intentional. It was intentional going back over the decades, but in the current life that we have, that we're experiencing right now at the moment, I think the information is out there to try and help as many people as possible. That's the way it is for me anyway. I think there's been so many books written and podcasts and audios and everything on the whole subject matter. So it is about trying to give the information out. However, what I would say is that, because I say this to clients, when you understand all the laws and you're working with them, and even if you just say the specific law of attraction, it's so complex, but yet it's actually so simple. And the reason being is that human nature will always apply. So somebody will want something to be brought about. In other words, I personally, I don't like using the word manifest, but let's just use it because that's what people will be familiar with. Somebody wants to manifest something, and typically what will happen is that they'll, this is what they've been taught. They'll be, meditate on it, visualize it in your mind, consume all your thoughts around what it is that you want to bring about, and so on. But you got to take inspired action, not the actions that your conscious mind is thinking of to do. It's all inspired action. You have to work on from an inspired action perspective. So that's one element. But what happens is people get too attached to the outcome. They get too attached to what they want to bring about, what they want to manifest. And as soon as you become attached to something, you're actually repelling it away. So that's where the pendulum comes into play. And I know that's something you want to discuss anyway, but that's when the pendulum comes into play. The hardest thing for people to do is to let go. And the more you let go, understanding how the universe works from an energetic perspective, and people talk about, gratitude, and I've a much deeper level of gratitude that I teach my clients with. So what do I mean by that? If anybody's written or read a lot of books around the law of attraction, it would say, well, have a gratitude diary. And a gratitude diary is, 3 things, write down 3 things in the morning that you're grateful for. And the last thing at night, write down 3 things that you're grateful for as well. And that will just get you into a higher vibration and so on. But what's happened for an awful lot of people is it becomes a chore. And if I go back to religious days and the church, all the prayers that were said from a task perspective. So I remember, and even my brothers will, if there's a funeral being had, I can hear them, because they're saying the prayers, and it's just rote learning. Like, it's just like they get through them as quickly as possible. So they actually forget the meaning of the prayer. And so when it comes to gratitude, it's not about just being grateful first thing in the morning, last thing at night, and say, okay, that's it. My task is done. I've now done it. And now let's move on to the next thing. Let me, read an hour of book, or let me meditate, or whatever, and so on. That's routine. And once it gets into a routine like that, you've lost all the essence. The whole thing about gratitude is that you're actually grateful throughout the whole day, every single part of the day. And that's the case that you're walking around saying, oh my God, I'm so grateful for X, Y, and Z. It's not. It's just the essence of you becomes grateful. And the hardest thing for people to comprehend, this is really the litmus test. If you're grateful for the things that people perceive as being hardships in your life, now you've mastered being grateful. So all the things, the knockbacks, or, for example, I remember having this story with, I used to have a community, an online community, and I went through a period whereby I got a puncture in my tire, because I was traveling down to the west of Ireland, and I got a puncture in my tire, and I was on the side of the road, and I couldn't get the tire off. I had to call somebody to get it off, and so on. But I was in a hurry to try and get to the meeting to where I was going to. But in that moment, it's actually saying, yeah, but what are you actually grateful for right now, in this moment, where you're standing on the side of the motorway, you're waiting in the blistering cold for the tow truck to turn up, and you're still late for a meeting that you're going to be. That's being grateful. Being able to be grateful for those moments where people perceive as being that it's a negative, but actually it's positive. Because I use the phrase of, everything's perfect and nothing's ever missing. And it is absolutely so true. Everything is perfect and nothing is ever missing. So every single moment that you're going through in life, even though you perceive as being a negative, it's absolutely perfect because it's meant to be there. So being grateful and using the law of attraction and using all the universal laws, there's so much involved in it, but people are hanging on to, well, I just got to visualize, just got to meditate on it. I've just got to, have it in my mind. But now they're, for one of a word, their pendulum is swung out, because now they're in desire mode, and they're now too attached to the outcome of what they want to have. And as soon as you become attached to something, it's you're moving it away. You're making a greater distance between what it is that you want to bring about. And the same thing applies for the opposite, hence the pendulum. So if whatever you're resisting will absolutely be created more of. So what I mean by that is there may be something in your life that you may not want to have happen, and you're consumed from it from a thought perspective, and you say, look, I don't want that to happen, don't want that to happen. So you're resisting as much as you possibly can, but I can guarantee it will happen. So letting go is letting go of the desires that you have, but also letting go of what you're resisting as well, and coming into a state of grace, a state of bliss, a state of flow, in terms of which I would call equilibrium. It's coming to that stage and saying, it's okay, everything's perfect. And now you're allowing the universe to deliver what it is that you want to have, i.e. manifest. Now that's when things start to show up.
Paul, you have covered some stuff there, and like I said, I was trying to take some notes. I'm trying to keep up. So right, so I just want to take this back from the audience here, because I am with you, and I want to carry on this conversation where we're going. I just want to take a step back so people can really understand what we're talking about here. Because again, I think one of the biggest things you mentioned there that people are going to be a bit lost in is going to be like, Paul, so what you're saying to me is that I need to be grateful when things are going bad. I need to be grateful when I'm having a hardship, or I'm ill, or I've lost someone close to me. So from a practical standpoint, how can people actually start to be grateful at the moment? Because I understand exactly what you're saying here, and correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, it's like when we come to exercise, people think they can go to the gym for 1 hour and then do what they want the rest of the day, and they're still going to get results. That's not really how it works. Same with gratitude. You can't just say a prayer or be in a state of gratitude or meditate for 5 to 10 minutes and then for the rest of the day be in a negative mood, because again, it's going to completely counteract each other. So how do you go from having that intentional 5-minute practice, whether it's meditation, gratitude, prayer, whatever it is, and then extend that feeling, which is obviously what we're talking about, gratitude is a feeling, it's not an action, it's a feeling. How do you go and extend that into your day-to-day life? And how do you sit in that feeling and try and look at all the positives and understand that things are happening for a reason, even if you can't see it yet? How do you help your clients kind of stay with that difficulty?
Yeah, perfect. So there's two things. One is, so I would have studied what's called neuro-linguistic programming, NLP for short. And what we learn in NLP is all about anchors. So an anchor is something that it can be something that you do, or something that is represented. So it's a symbol, and that symbol becomes an anchor. So that's the premise to what I'm going to explain. So it comes from NLP. So I'll encourage my clients to find something in their house or in their office that they are coming in contact with on a regular basis. So and the easiest thing, honestly, is if let's just say they're walking down the stairs and there happens to be a picture on the stairs or in the hallway. It means that every single time they walk through the hallway, there's something that they're going to pass. So let's just say it's a picture. So now what we do is we anchor that picture, or I just encourage my clients to anchor that picture with every single time they pass that picture, they just take a few moments out and just be grateful for what it is that they're experiencing. It could be the kettle. So every time they go to make a cup of coffee, we anchor the kettle and say, look, every single time you're going to switch on the kettle, just switch it on and just be present for a few moments while the kettle is boiling for you to make your cup of coffee, and just be present within yourself and express in your own mind what it is that you're grateful for. So what we're doing is we're forming a habit of having different anchors all around the place. It could be in your car, it could be in your office, it could be anywhere in your home. That's something that you're going to pass or be in contact with on a regular basis. By doing that now, you're actually forming a habit. So rather than being just first thing in the morning, last thing at night, throughout your whole day, you're now actually getting to a moment whereby you're just being present. And being present is just, it's not having any thought. It's a mini meditation, let's put it that way. It's just having no thoughts. It's just being there, being fully able to experience just who you are and the enormity of this universe, for want of a better word. And that's being present. So you're not being distracted by thoughts. You're not being distracted by what's going on around you and so on. You're literally just, it's like an awakened meditation, for want of a better word. That's what being present means. And now you can just be grateful in that moment. On the flip side then is, okay, so what happens when you're experiencing something that people perceive as being negative or whatever? Now what I get them to do is, okay, so how is that serving you? Or so I ask them the question, so how is it serving you? How is the experience serving you? What are you learning from it? Or what are you being prompted to do from that experience that happened? And you can take any experience that people perceive as being negative and see how it's actually serving you. So I'll ask, okay, so what are the benefits of that experience? What are you, if you were to, so let me put it this way. Years and years ago, I would have gone through periods whereby money will be tight. So I wouldn't be doing much in the business, wouldn't be getting a lot of money in, a lot of clients in, and all that kinds of things. So I would get into fear mode. And fear for me will be paralysis. So there's fight or flight or paralysis. So for me, it will typically be paralysis. But when I become present within the fear and allow the fear to come up and observe it, not to dwell on it, but just to observe that fear, what is it actually trying to get me to do? And what it's trying to get me to do is actually some activities to do in relation to marketing. So what I mean by that is, so I'm a natural introvert by nature. So therefore, I'm not going to go out into the world and try and, you know, meet as many people as I possibly can or do different activities in relation to, and if you were to look at me now, I still don't do a huge amount of marketing activities. But that fear is actually trying to get me. So fear is feedback. So when you're getting into the fear, you're kind of, and you observe and you say, okay, so what is the lesson from this fear? What am I to learn, or what are the actions that I'm to do as a result of what I'm experiencing? And what you'll find is there's always something. And that's being grateful for that showing up in your life in order to take action or to do what it is that you're, the lesson that you're to learn from that moment in life.
Because you can get that with anything, can't you? I feel like when people struggle with anxiety or depression, and it's realizing that like these feelings and emotions, they're there to try and tell you something. And I literally saw a client yesterday that was struggling a lot with grief. And I was saying, I think it's Queen Elizabeth, the one that recently passed away, was saying that grief is the price you pay for love. I was explaining that the reason why you're grieving so hard is because you clearly love this person so much. And as soon as she kind of like came to that awareness, she was like, wow, actually, yes. Obviously, I don't claim to be an expert in grief, but I was just explaining the feelings. And again, the body knows, like you're feeling something for a reason. And again, I think there's a difference here, correct me if I'm wrong, but intuition and feelings are two very different things as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes people can confuse the two and think that they're feeling something, and it's an intuition where, again, to your kind of point, I feel like intuition is very grounded in the present, whereas feelings are very, what's the word? They're basically like warning signs, essentially, of something. Am I making sense with that? Because there's something I was looking at when I was doing research into you about the intuition. And again, it's something I think I knew there is a difference between feelings and emotions and intuition. But since I've just brought that up, can you talk about that as well? Because I feel like people get them confused and mixed up. So while we're on that, can we touch on that?
Yeah. So when you have a thought, you create an emotion in your brain. This is sort of from a scientific perspective. You have a thought, you create the emotion that creates the electron neurons within the brain itself, and that gives you feedback to the body. And now that's how you sense it from a feeling perspective. That's literally how it works. So you're creating those feelings. So if you're observing something, you're observing it, you're having a thought about it, you're creating an emotion, and that emotion then is creating the feeling itself. So you're creating it. Intuition on the flip side it's just a knowing. So you'll have a feeling with it, but in some respects, when I'm working with clients, that intuition, that feeling is. So let me give you an example. So I might have a client say, "Look, I'm thinking of doing X," and I'll immediately get a feeling from what they may not even have kind of said fully what they're thinking of doing and so on. And my immediate feeling is, no, don't do it. So it'll either be a yes or a no. It'll be a positive or a negative. It'll be a kind of a sense, but I'm not even creating those because I don't even know what they're about to say. So intuition is literally it's so split second, but it's just a knowing within yourself. So you're not even creating it. It's and again, let me go back to the science. When you break it down, you have the thought, you have the emotion creates the feeling. You're creating that, okay? With an intuition, you haven't created anything at all. It's literally just implanted, for want of a better word. So it's just You have the feeling, and now you have to dissect the feeling and the knowing. The knowing is literally you haven't even thought about it, and all of a sudden you've got this information piece of literally just whatever it is that is either about to take place, or what you're about to discuss, or what is of benefit for the client that you're working with. And everybody has intuition. Every single individual. How do human nature, how do human beings were developed? If you go back again to the caveman days, that's like we so much used our intuition back in caveman days. Because if you got a predator that you've got to be aware of, as soon as you sense something happening in the jungle, you've got to get back to your cave. That's literally intuition. Every single individual has intuition, but we just, over the centuries, we've gotten rid of it. So let me put it to you this way. One of the things that I'll ask my clients to do or encourage them to do is meditation. That's one of the primest things. Okay. By developing your meditation, you're developing your intuition, because you're quietening the mind in order to pick up the inspired thoughts from an intuitive perspective. So it's one of the first things. So when it comes to all the different activities that people would have done in the past, so people would have had a form of meditation in so many different respects. Not that they went to church, that's one aspect of it, but they, if you go back centuries, they didn't have TVs, they didn't even have radios, so they were present in those moments when they were just having a conversation with somebody else. But there was an awful lot more quietness, let's put it that way, back in decades ago. Roll forward, now we're being bombarded with so much from a social media perspective. So people literally never switch off. And the way work has gone, again, people don't switch off because they've got emails coming in, they've got WhatsApp messages coming in, and they're scrolling through social media. But one of the fundamental things that people have gotten rid of is literally handwriting. Now, handwriting activates the executive center part of the brain. The executive center is positioned in the prefrontal cortex, which is just behind your forehead. And that executive function is all about innovation, creativity, objectivity, planning. That's what it does. So because less and less people actually do handwriting, hence the reason why if you read the books, but people don't understand the reason behind it. You'll read the books and they'll say, do journaling. And they say, well, when you do journaling, get a notebook and write down your thoughts and so on. But they haven't explained the science behind writing down your thoughts. And so some people will go off and they'll do it on their iPad, or they'll type it into a computer or whatever, and so on. But they're actually missing the trick. And the trick is, by physically handwriting your thoughts, you're now activating the executive center part of your brain. Your executive center is more directly linked with your unconscious, your intuitive part, and now you're activating your intuitive part. So the more you actually handwrite, for want of a better word, do your meditation, now you're developing your intuition. And now from there on, it's about trusting it, understanding it, the nuances with it, and know and understand and knowing and sensing the difference between what's intuition and what am I actually consciously making up. And that's where what I would say to people is that the more you develop your intuition, and the more you develop your intention and your mindset from the point of view of how you use your mind and your thoughts, because it's the intention behind the thoughts that are really absolutely critical. Now you're being prepared for the future is what I'm going to say. And that's the transition phase that we're going through right now at the moment. So hence the reason why you'll see so many things come up over the years. So you'll be much more prepared for the future of how we're actually going to be operating from that perspective. I'll just leave that there.
I'm talking about that off air. I feel like people may not be able to talk about that off air, but just linking this back again. So as people listen to this, because again, I get my clients to journal all the time, and people say, "Oh yeah, I write it on my phone, like type it in." And I say, "No, pen and paper, just get it connected." What's your thoughts on iPads and like handwriting on an iPad? Is that the same sort of thing? Is that the next best thing to pen and paper? Like, or does it have to literally be the ink and the paper?
No, it's fine. So I've what's called a Remarkable. Remarkable is like an iPad, but it's a tablet which you write on, and it has the same sense and feeling of handwriting. So no, it's just a physical activity of handwriting. It doesn't have, you could be right with a crayon.
And then my second thoughts are with this, when you mentioned about everyone's intuitive, the one thing I can think of on this is that I get this all the time where I'll be doing some work and I'll get this feeling, I've got to contact X person. I reach out and they'll say, how did you know? And I feel like a lot of people get that, where they'll just be like, oh, I'm just going to text whatever it is. And they just think it's a coincidence that they've thought about texting that person. So is that a part of the intuition? And then also to link it back to what we spoke about before, when it comes to vibration and energy, when you're working with clients, is it an energy that you're picking up which causes the intuition almost? So it's like through the screen, or when you're face to face, you're picking up their energy and their intention potentially behind what they're saying to you, that then gives you that intuition? Or is it solely something that you're picking up on away from somebody else?
The latter. Yeah. So I think I missed your first part. First part was...
Well, the first part was about everyone having intuition and that gut feeling when they need to text someone.
So those nudges and those feelings, those I call them inspired thoughts. They're absolutely your intuition. And the best way probably for people to start developing their intuition is that when they get a complete random thought that's they haven't even been thinking about, they've just been doing like what you described. You're doing an activity and then all of a sudden the thought pops into your head. That's the universe, your conscious, trying to give you those nudges and prompts, and they're the ones you've absolutely got to take action on. That's intuition side of things. When it comes to me when I'm working with clients, no, it's not an energy I pick up from people. You can pick up an energy, and I know a lot of intuitives work in that way. So when I'm working with clients and I'm committed with them, I literally, I could be driving down the road, I could be doing any kind of activity, and then all of a sudden a thought will pop into my mind about one of my clients, and then I get onto my clients and say, look, you've got to do X, Y, and Z. It can happen from the point of view of I fell across this by accident. I was away on a ski trip, and in a particular chalet, and there were photographs being passed around the table, and of the family members that were in the group itself. And so the photographs came to me, and then literally all of a sudden I start getting a whole load of information about the individual that I'm looking at in the photograph. And I described what I was getting described, the whole personality and everything about the individual itself. And the person that was their parent, they said, well, okay, well, here's my other child. So it became, for want of a better word, it came one of those party tricks. And so I was handed a second photograph, pretty much exactly the same thing. And I said, actually, I have a concern about this particular child. Here's why, da, 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 da. So the reason why I give that as an example is because it can be anything as mundane as a photograph to, you're going through life and you'll pick up, or you're going through your day and you'll pick up information. So it's not necessarily that I'm not even observing, I'm not even, for one of the word, I'm not even connecting with the individual, but yet I'm receiving information for that individual, if that makes sense.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's something that we spoke about in our conversation before we actually arranged the podcast, about this collective consciousness as well. So again, that's why I love meditation, because I feel like you almost get downloads, is how I kind of describe it. You're kind of just there, and things will sort of come to you, and that's the way that I can sort of describe that. What's your understanding of this collective consciousness? And again, for people that may not have heard this, understand it, maybe think it's a bit woo-woo, can you kind of, I say as best you can you try and break down this universal consciousness? Because it goes by loads of different names and different things. So can you try and explain to people that may not really understand it or think it's a bit kind of woo-woo?
So everybody, not everybody, I hate using that absolutes. The vast majority of people will have, when you ask them, and you ask, so when you ask them on a personal level, as a one-to-one level, do you believe that there's something greater than us? They'll say yes. Do you think that there's something more than we actually exist? And they'll typically say yes. And then say, okay, so what's the label that you'll put on that something that's greater than us? And some people will say, well, it's higher power, it's higher mind, it's God. For me personally, it's God. That's the term I use. It's God, it's higher mind, it's higher consciousness. But the best way, and people will use the phrase super consciousness, the collective consciousness, people use those phrases as well. So they're all kind of interchangeable for everybody. but they pretty much mean the same thing.
Mm.
But the way I would describe, so even though I use the word God, because I feel a more connected sense when I use the word God. And that's the only reason why I use it. It's not from a religious perspective or whatever it be and so on. It's just for me to have a much deeper and closer connection from that side. But if I was to describe God, if you call it that way, I would use the terms the collective consciousness, the superconscious. So the collective consciousness from the point of view of, think of it this way, that we come into this life, we have a life, we exit this life. Okay. So where do we go? We go into a collective consciousness. So all the energy that everyone has goes now back into a collective consciousness. We're still here. We're all still part of the one, and we are one. So we're separate, but we're the same. We're all connected. We're all one, which again is one of the universal laws. So we're all part of the collective consciousness, both within our human body, but also when we exit this human body, this meat sack that we carry around throughout our whole life. So as we go back into the collective consciousness, so hence the reason why, and again, yeah, some of your listeners might say, well, that's majorly woo-woo. You'll come across a lot of mediums, and there are really some exceptional mediums out there whereby they can connect with an energy of somebody who's passed on. And the information that they can pass on to the client is so accurate and so precise that nobody else would have known apart from the client and the person that's been passed away. So how can you explain that? And the way I explain it is that energy of that individual has gone into the collective conscious. So you can still connect with that individual, absolutely still connect with that individual, but it's all part of the one. It's a bit like the drop of the water, drop of the ocean, but also the ocean itself. So if you can imagine the ocean is being the collective consciousness, you take one drop of water out of that ocean, it's still part of the one. So it's still part of the universal consciousness. And that's my, for one of the word, the best definition I can put on for God. I just happen to use the word God. Other people use higher power, higher mind. Universe, again, is a common term given the books that have been published over years. But they all mean the intention behind them is to mean the same thing.
And I think a lot of this as well, because again, long-term listeners of my show will know all these books I've got behind me are really, really old books, talking a lot about this stuff we're talking about here. And again, some use the word God, a lot of them use collective consciousness, universal energy, whatever you want to call it, the source, whatever it is. And again, for me, I feel like there's been a lot of stuff in recent years, not just recent years, about burying this stuff and kind of removing us away, and so we're not aware that we are connected to this consciousness. And one of the big things that I teach my clients is that we're all energy. Like, we are spiritual beings with an intellect in a physical body, and it's going back to the law of thermodynamics. Like, energy cannot be destroyed. So we are energy beings, and we look at atoms. What is an atom? Well, they used to think that an atom was just a little ball, but now they realize inside that ball is pure energy. So as human beings, we are pure energy, and energy can't be destroyed. It can only be transferred. So as you said, the physical body goes, but then where does the energy of the human being go? Where does that essence go? And again, it's just explaining the same sort of thing of, like, there is this collective consciousness. You can, if you get yourself into a place where, again, vibrationally, whatever you want to call it, like you remove the distractions, you can connect with whatever it is that you need, that divine intuition. You've got a question you're answering, whatever it may be. And I think, like, for me, if more people knew the power that we had, the world would be in a very different place. And again, I don't like to sound like a conspiracy person. This is kind of the second time I mention this, but I do feel like a lot of this stuff is suppressed because, again, there's stuff in these books. And in one of the books I've got, which is actually over there, there's a lady that talks about some stuff she was doing to help people using this collective consciousness. And this, I think the book was wrote in 1901 or 1902. And she said in 100 years, this will be common practice. And that everyone will be doing this, blah, 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 blah. And I kind of now look at the state of the world and I'm like, you were on the right path. Clearly, there was this collective, almost like awakening, this acceptance of what we're talking about. But then we've kind of drifted off somewhere. So, and again, I only kind of touched on it potentially about a future, but do you feel like we're coming back to being connected with this? Do you think there's kind of like a bit of an awakening? Do you think there's more of an acceptance of this?
Okay, I'm going to explain it this way. So I bring everything back to the pendulum, everything. So from a macro level and a micro level, I bring everything back to a pendulum. So for listeners to understand what's a pendulum, if you can recall in your mind a Graham Potter clock, And within the grandfather clock, you'll see this pendulum, and the pendulum swings from left to right, and that's what is part of the movement of the grandfather clock. From a macro level, that pendulum will swing from left to right. From macro level, what I mean by that is that you'll have different politics in the world. You'll have different institutions in the world. So whether it be financial, religious, political, you'll have war and peace. So on a much, much macro level, you can see that pendulum. You can observe the pendulum literally going from left to right. Even from what we've had over in the last, say, probably maybe 20 or 30 years, where if you go back prior to that, it would have been very, very masculine. And now if you look at the pendulum, it's gone very, very feminine. So there's a huge amount of shift over to the feminine energy. But it still has to come back into equilibrium. So it's never, the arc that's created on one side of the pendulum has to be created on the other side of the pendulum. So that's happening on a micro level, but it also happens on a micro level, whereby on an individual level. So an individual will, when they're not in equilibrium, they are experiencing something on either side. So again, think of it from the point of view of, on both sides, you could have heat, you could have cold, you could have somebody that's really stingy and somebody that's very generous. Again, two opposites. So everybody will experience that pendulum going from left to right. What or again, if I was to observe it, we've had dogma being created over, literally thousands of years, over the last while, whereby we were all sinners, and if we didn't live a particular life, we were going to hell, which, hell doesn't exist. I'm sorry to blow the myth, heaven doesn't exist either. So, but what I mean by that is that, so there's not a lot of dogma from a religious perspective, but if you look back on it, it's all from a power position perspective in terms of how people could be controlled. So the pendulum, think of it this way, the pendulum has been on one side. And then over the last, centuries or so, that pendulum has been slowly moving back over to the other side. The arc that's been created on one side has to be created on the other side. So now it went to a point whereby it was completely woo-woo. And what I mean by that is you had so many different theories and experiences and this, that, and the other coming out on the other side, and people would just reject it. So that's gone way, way over on the other side. What we're happening right now at the moment is coming back into equilibrium, whereby it's absolutely where we will use both sides. But yes, there is an element to dampen the, because again, when the power is put into the individual, well, then there's very little control that we can be maintained. So it's not from a conspiracy perspective, it's just how life happens. So when you put the power back into the individual, meaning that if you knew how you could develop your intuition, you knew how you could harness the power of your mind and your thoughts to bring about what it is that you want to bring about, you will be so powerful. So that's a lot of power that can be put into a lot of people. So hence the reason that, yes, there will be a reason for keeping that dampened, for one bad word. But we are moving closer and closer. It's I described for clients over the last number of years, whereby all I could sense was a war in energy. I call it an energetic war. And you could say it's an energetic war between good and bad. Just keep it as simple as that. And a number of years ago, I said, and even up to maybe about 12 months ago, I said, do you know what? It's accelerating. It's getting, it's getting faster, and it's getting higher. And I call it kind of like, no, my own sense, it's 50-50 at the moment as regards who's going to win. Right now at the moment, I would suspect that it's my own sense is that for one word, the good side is going to win. And the good side is where we get back into how we were designed to operate, which is literally using the power of our mind, the power of our thoughts, how we could use our energy and our intention around what it is that we want to have in this world. Because once you're operating from that space, and yes, everything can be used for good or bad. But let me bring back, because I love everything that's aviation. Anybody that's gone into outer space will always come back and talk about the overview effect. And the overview effect is whereby you see the Earth from space and you just have this divine amazement, wow, inspiration for how the Earth looks from such, literally the size of your thumb, looking at it from space. And people talk about it, it's just so awe-inspiring. and they talk about it in a spiritual way as opposed to a conscious way. When you're operating from the space whereby all you see is love, all you see is being grateful, all you see is the amazement of this human beings, for want of a better word, all you have is love. And that's hugely, hugely powerful compared to what's actually happening in the world right now at the moment. But again, we have to have contrast. There's no point in trying to have a world that's going to be full of peace, because that's never, ever, ever going to exist. It's all about, because you have to have contrast. That's what we're here to experience. But it's what we can learn from what's actually happening to move closer to what we're designed to move closer to, which is love.
I love that. And again, I'm going to take a bit of a sort of tangent here, because again, I'm very respectful of your time here, but something I feel like my audience listening to you and your awareness and the understanding that you've got, again, of collective consciousness, you spoke about from a very young age, this intuition that you had, this healing ability. But I know that you've had your own personal struggles. So can you talk a little bit about your own personal struggles where you kind of got to the point where you didn't actually know if you wanted to be here, and how someone with your awareness, your understanding of things, got to that place, and then how you managed to get out of it, and kind of like what lessons and perspectives you learned from coming through that? Because a lot of people are struggling in the world, as we've said. There's a lot of pull, good and bad. And again, especially with some stuff that happened a couple of years ago, people are still lingering that energy. So listening to what you're saying, and they're like, yeah, but Paul, you don't understand. You do understand. So can you kind of like just touch on that time in your life, how almost like how it happened, because it's like you should have had the awareness to get yourself out of this, but like, how did it all come about, and the lessons that you learned?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're absolutely right from point of view of my thought at the time, and would have been for years, was what's actually going to keep me wanting to live. Because the vast majority of my time I spent in planning, contemplating, thinking about it. Bottom line is, let's call it what it was. Thinking about suicide. So I wanted to check out of life. I wanted to I could think of all the different ways, research all the different ways. What would be the easiest way to check out? I'm laughing, but I know it's not a laughable subject, believe me. But like a lot of clients that I work with in this space will know when they've gotten through it, they will laugh as well. They will actually get to that point. And what I mean by that is that, so for a lot of time, those thoughts were, I just want out of here. I call it a mental pain. It's not a physical pain. It's a mental pain. I just do not want to be here. And the earliest recollection was at the age of 10. That's how far back it goes. So, and again, at the time, I didn't understand it. But looking back now, I absolutely do understand, because I'm an intuitive, I'm an empath. And at the age of 10 and growing up even before that, I was picking up so much other stuff from people around me that it was a horrible place to be in. So it was a standard family, standard middle class, in terms of, there was no abuse, there was no kind of poverty from that perspective. It was literally just, I purely just did not want to be in this world. I just thought it was being the most horrible world to be ever in. Looking back on and knowing what I now know, I can understand why I had those feelings. But what I learned from it, and it wasn't until later on, because I went through everything of what the vast majority of people will do in order to deal with their suicide ideation. So people, what they'll hear is, eat healthily, remove alcohol, have an exercise, go walking, go to the gym or whatever it be, find out what you're passionate about, have a sense of purpose. So I did all of those, and every single thing that people will talk about in relation to purpose, I did, but it never gave me the answer. So people talk about finding your why, finding your passions. Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. I got to the end and I was like, okay, right, that was it. Not dismissing the book, but it didn't give me the answers of what I was looking for. And so I got to a point whereby I've got to find my own answers. And that's exactly what I did. So the information that I was getting from my clients, I discovered was actually all about their purpose. So I would get insights, downloads, knowings, images in relation to what an individual's life purpose was. I didn't know it at the time growing up, but when I started developing my career and I managed to be turning companies around, and again, just to explain that term for listeners, company that's heading towards bankruptcy or liquidation, or is making losses year on year, I'd go into those companies, I'd turn them around as quickly as possible, so now they're getting into profits, and then we would grow and scale the companies from that perspective. I was using I was using my intuition from helping the companies and helping my clients, but equally I found out that from the evidence that I was observing with my clients, it was actually their purpose that's the information I was gathering from them as well. So to cut a long story short, I reverse engineered what I was doing for my clients, because I would often come back from a client meeting having given them loads and loads of information about what they're here to do, where they're to go, what direction that they would travel in, for one better word, along their purpose and so on. And I would sit in my car in the car park after those, I had amazing meetings, because I really love those kind of meetings. But I'd sit in the car and say, all I want is just for somebody to tell me what I'm here to do, what my purpose is, and to give me the same kind of level of information and so on. So I reverse engineered what I was doing for clients. To cut a long story short, I developed into a methodology, and that methodology now gives so much clarity and certainty for clients. It is, the stories I get back from clients is just phenomenal. So I turned it into an online course. I turned it into a book. I only published a book there a couple of weeks back, and I'm already getting stories from readers of how much of a difference it's made for them. So how I got out of it, and the learning, for one better word, of that period in my life was, and again, let me bring back to something we discussed earlier on, which is every emotion that you experience is feedback. So we are to experience more joy, more fun, more hope, more zest, more passion for life. But those experiences that on the flip side of fear, anxiety, suicide ideation, all the thoughts of depression and all the kinds of things are feedback of something that we are to do, and to get us on a track of, for one of the word, getting us closer to, again, our purpose, but also what we're here to do. So it's not that don't get me wrong, I absolutely know what those feelings are like. I hate them. I absolutely hate them. They're horrible for anybody to experience, but there is always, it's never the solution. It's never the solution to check out. Never, ever, ever. And if you want my spiritual side from that perspective, the reason being is because you have to come back all over again and go through the whole same experiences all over again in the next lifetime. So when I learned that from myself, I said, okay, I better start finding answers for myself. And hence the reason why there's always, and I'm so grateful for those experiences. People will say, on one side, I hate those thoughts. But on the other side, I'm absolutely so grateful for having gone through that, because now I know what it's like for clients, and those particular clients that I'm working with, but also what those experiences are like. And it got me to develop the methodology that I developed over 2 decades. And now seeing the benefits for the people that are actually benefit from that methodology.
It's the same thing I say. I always say that depression is the best thing that ever happened to me, and people kind of look a bit confused. It's like, if it hadn't happened to me and I hadn't hit my rock bottom and come out the other side, I probably wouldn't be here. And for me, I always say that life happens for us, not to us. But it first has to happen to us in order for it to happen for us. And as we said, got to learn the lessons to actually make it mean something. And for me, like, just hearing your sort of what you're saying there in your story, and realizing that your struggle, my thing was the same. I had no purpose. I had a very successful life on paper. I was a successful model, had a very successful business, had money in the bank, blah, blah, blah. But it was just Groundhog Day, and there was nothing there to fulfill me because I wasn't living my true purpose. There's no reason necessarily for me to be here. So I thought, until I found meaning in that. So I'm really glad that you kind of like just nice to put it together, because I feel like that's something that people are missing. With the whole thing is like, I believe that everyone's here for a purpose, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And a purpose could be just to be a good parent. And I also feel like now that's almost been demonized. But it's like, well, you need to raise that child, because actually you being a good parent could then allow that person to be someone that, I don't know, cures world hunger or whatever it is. But you had to do that to the best of your ability in order for that to happen. And I feel like nowadays people think their purpose is to make all this money, live in big houses and blah, blah, blah. But you look at the celebrities and the people with all that money that, again, choose to check out, that are struggling with mental health. I think people really get confused with purpose and what it actually truly is. You mentioned it in passing, and I just want to sort of go back to this. Your latest book, What is it? What's it about? And why should people buy it?
So the title of the book is Genius Unlocked, and the subtitle to it is Discovering Your Life Purpose and Innate Genius. So as I mentioned before, I did everything that everybody else does, conventional wisdom. So find your passions, find your why, ikigai, all that kinds of things. And none of those gives the answers. Most people will come with information, well, my purpose is to help others, but it's still not specific enough. So I break purpose down into 4 different elements. One is what I call your genius drivers. And your drivers are what's going to give you joy, fulfillment, that zest for life. Then I call it your next element is your genius quest. And again, if you look up the definition of quest, quest is long and arduous journey to find something. Your quest is your specific what. So when people are trying to find, okay, so yeah, but what am I supposed to do? Your quest is what you are specifically here to do. So, and I use the word genius in all the different elements, hence the reason Genius Unlocked, because the origin of the word genius comes from Gignaray, which is the innate ability that we were born with. It's the innate spirit that we are actually born with. So that's where genius actually comes from. Then there's your genius inspiration. So people talk about, find your why to give you the inspiration for what it is that you do. But when you're trying to find out your why, the whole premise of find your why is, the question is, why do you do what you do? Now, what if what you're doing is not what you're supposed to do? It's going to be the wrong why. Mm-hmm. Second of all, we've talked an awful lot about intuition and unconscious and all that kind of things over this particular episode. People work at the question, okay, why do you do what you do? They're working it out from a conscious thinking perspective. But every single thing, when it comes to your purpose, comes from your unconscious. So I prefer to use the word inspiration. Again, the origin of the word inspiration comes from inspirare, which is the breath that is breathed within. It's the divine guidance, divine inspiration. So people have had moments over their whole life where they've had those inspired moments, whereby they're struck by awe or inspiration, or they have a positive emotional response to something that they're observing. That's the unconscious trying to nudge you, say, that's exactly what I want. So there's an understanding behind that inspiration when you reverse engineer it. So that's the inspiration. And then there's your genius role. And think of your genius role as being, I've identified 10 different archetypes out of all the clients that I've worked with over the years. And an individual will unconsciously play one of those archetypes or one of those roles throughout their whole life. But because, especially if you're a business owner, you wear different hats. So people move away from their actual genius role. But in actual fact, when we come back to all the 4 elements, and you start now to map between your genius drivers, your genius role, your genius inspiration, your genius quest, every single one of those elements works together. So it gives you your what, what's going to give you fulfillment, your why or your inspiration, and how you are absolutely supposed to deliver on your purpose. So everybody has a specific, unique life purpose. We have a shared purpose. And that shared purpose is to live life, first of all, to be your genius you. That's the genius elements that I spoke about. So our shared purpose is to be your genius you, to live life fully, to experience, to love, and to evolve. So every single individual, every single human being shares that overarching life purpose. But within that, then we have our own unique life purpose, which is your genius you. You're to be you throughout your whole life. And that your genius you is made up of your drivers, your inspiration, your role, and your quest. And that's what you're here to pursue. And as soon as you find out what those elements are, now you can go after and pursue your purpose with intention.
That sounds like, honestly, so I know I did research into it and I knew what the book was about, but you actually hear you explaining it, I'm definitely going to be getting a copy of that myself, and I'll speak to you about that off air. But for people that are interested in buying the book, I'm going to put their link down below. But if people want to connect with you, again, to reach out, either to learn more about whatever it is you offer, either from a personal perspective or from a business perspective, where is the best place for people to reach you?
The easiest way is probably just to my website. Again, I'm not on social media apart from LinkedIn. So if you go to my website, davisbusinessconsultants.com, and there's a whole load of other free resources there. If people want to find out what their genius role is, they can find it there by their genius role quiz. They can, there's other resources. There's, again, links to all my books. I've 3 books now published so far. Working on my 4th book right now at the moment. But yeah, so my website, davisbusinessconsultants.com. So they'll hear about my business side of things. The 2 of them are completely intertwined at this stage. into how I work with clients.
Amazing. Honestly, Paul, so I want to say a big thank you for today. Like I said, the value that you give my audience has been absolutely incredible. And like I said, we've gone off on massive tangents. We weren't even talking about some stuff we're supposed to talk about. But again, it's been fantastic value. And I believe there's a purpose and a reason why we went off on those tangents. And I know that we would have added some value to people. So I want to say a massive thank you very much for today.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. Absolutely amazing. And I enjoy these conversations. So it's a thrill for me, honestly.